The Miami Heat begin their quest for their fourth championship in franchise history in 8 days against the Detroit Pistons. If you're excited for the Heat season to get underway, I'm absolutely pumped. But if you're with me, type me in the comment section. All right, let's get into it. Today's Heat Report is all about injury news and Victor Oladipo. I am Nick Roloff. That is the topic on today's show. Caleb Martin has not played in the preseason this much because he hurt his knee early on in Heat training camp, but he's not the only Miami Heat player that's been dealing with injuries. Jaime Jaquez, Nikola Jovic, and RJ Hampton. We'll talk about all four players here in a bit, but we start with Ira Winderman of the Sentinel, and he said that Caleb Martin, Nikola Jovic both had a degree of participation in practice today. Jimmy Butler also practiced. No formal injury reports in the preseason. And I'm not sweating anything about Jimmy. He's not played in the preseason yet, but it's also been labeled as dental procedure. I don't think he's actually been hurt. Sounds like Jimmy being Jimmy and not wanting to play in the preseason. But I'll start here with Nikola Jovic because it's absolutely terrific to see him on the court again because he suffered that knee injury in the Heat's first preseason game against the Charlotte Hornets. And I was concerned because he went to the doctors the next day. Even though the Heat said they weren't concerned, he went to the doctors and they didn't hear results back for quite a bit. So I was holding my breath to make sure number 5 is all right to go, someone who I'm very high on this upcoming season. But Jovic is back and looks to be on track to be ready for the Pistons on October 25th. Let's shift things to Caleb Martin now because he is back. He hasn't really at least participated at all in the preseason so far for the Miami Heat. He is projected to be the 6th man in the Heat's rotation this upcoming season. Obviously, a postseason hero for the Heat last year, absolutely dominating the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. Should have probably won Conference Finals MVP if we're being real. Should have shot 60% from the floor and averaged 20 points a night. But it's good to see Martin getting back in the action, being in practice, because he's someone the Heat are going to rely on a lot this season off the bench. He's going to be someone Pat Riley is expecting to jump up from 9 points per game to maybe 12, 13 as that 6th-man option for the Heat. So good to see Caleb Martin start playing some basketball once again. Also, RJ Hampton returned to practice for the Heat. Someone that I thought was a real candidate to be on the active roster come October 25th. Obviously a two-way player for the Heat right now. He sustained a hamstring injury right before the Heat's second preseason game against the San Antonio Spurs. So good to see him back. Hopefully he can get some burn here against the Nets on Wednesday or the Rockets on Friday, and he can show something to earn a roster spot or just keep himself on that two-way slot for the Heat. The former first-round pick, I like his athleticism. I like his defense. I really hope he can carve out some minutes for the Heat this season, maybe as that third-string point guard. But now I want to talk about the 18th overall selection in the 2023 NBA Draft, and that is Jaime Jaquez Jr., who looked terrific in the first preseason game against the Hornets, but he also got injured the next day in practice, suffering a groin injury. Barry Jackson said Jaime Jaquez Jr. was the only player who didn't practice at all on Tuesday. He won't play preseason game tomorrow, which is fourth out of the 5th Heat preseason game. Team are being careful with him, understandably, and then obviously he mentioned Hampton, Martin, Jovic. But I'm concerned about Jaime Jaquez Jr. I'll tell you why in more depth here in a second, but I want to get your guys' thoughts on it first. It is today's pinned comment. So I want to hear your thoughts. It's a very important question to me. Are you concerned about Triple J's, Jaime Jaquez Jr.'s status for opening night next Wednesday? Type Y for yes, type N for no. I am, because the reality of the situation is groin injuries are nothing to play with. I feel like I'm Drake spitting that bar. Sprained ankle, boy, ain't nothing to play with. Groin injuries are the same way. They are very serious injuries that will linger and cause potential re-injuries as the season progresses. And I wouldn't be surprised if the 18th pick did not play, was not active for the Heat in their game next Wednesday, because I think he's going to be needed for the Heat to have success this year and in the postseason. So don't rush him back. It's game 1 of 82. Just sit back, let him get fully healthy, and then bring him back when he's actually needed come November And if he misses the first couple weeks, I don't think that's a big deal to me. Jaime Jaquez Jr. looked good. He's a 22-year-old young guy who plays like a veteran. I feel confident that if they just bring him back, ease him along, he will still be able to jump in and carve out a role on this Heat rotation. But now, let's talk about the Heat's point guard plan. It's been a revelating topic for the Miami Heat this offseason, obviously with Damian Lillard, but there's also been questions about who's going to be the backup point guard for the Heat to Kyle Lowry if no trade. Obviously, there was no trade. It slots in to be Josh Richardson, but could Jay Rich actually be the starter? Barry Jackson said this today in a little article about the Heat point guard depth. Richardson, said he has been used exclusively as a point guard since the start of training camp. He began his career as a Heat rookie playing that position before morphing into a combo guard. And my first thoughts on this quote right now is that Erik Spoelstra, the Heat head coach, he has absolutely no problem playing Jay Rich at point guard. So the question is he going to be the point guard off the bench for the Miami Heat, or is he going to be the starting point guard in the backcourt alongside Tyler Hero? I give you what I think my pick's going to be here in a second, but just like earlier, I want to hear your guys' thoughts first. If you think Kyle Lowry should be the starting point guard next Wednesday, type KL. If you think it should be number 0, J Rich, type JR in the comment section. But before I actually give you my full thoughts, I got to give some love to Prize Picks, who are sponsoring today's show. They are the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. You know I'll be playing Prize Picks tomorrow for the Heat's preseason game, which we'll be live for, by the way. But I want to ask you, in the theme of Prize Picks, more or less 24.5 points per game for Tyler Hero this season. Type M for more, type L for less. I would be typing my M's. I think Hero's going to average 25 this season and be an all-star for the Heat. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Shout out to Prize Picks. But going back to the Heat's point guard situation, my selection for who should start opening night, give me Jay Rich, give me Josh Richardson. And it's not more Kyle Lowry hate, but I think it's better for the veteran, the 37-year-old, to come off the bench. Because if you just rewind the clock a little bit to the postseason where the Heat went on a deep run, he was at his best, being an absolute contributor for the Heat when he was leading that second rotation for the Heat as a facilitator. When Jimmy Butler sat down and you're allowed Kyle Lowry to be the main ball handler for the Miami Heat, that's where they saw some success. The Heat would go down early in a lot of these games in the past postseason, but Lowry, Bam Adebayo, and Caleb Martin on that second unit would bring them back into games. I think it is best well served for the Heat this year to start Josh Richardson, at least early on. Experiment with that, with Richardson and Hero in the backcourt, because it's also going to allow Hero to be more aggressive on offense and help him defensively, because Jay Rich is such a lengthy defender at that point guard position, and then allow Lowry to be that second rotation, second line ball handler and help he ease some of that offensive issues when Jimmy Butler or Tyler Hero head to the bench. I mentioned the Heat's 4th preseason game a little bit earlier in the show. Guess what? We will be live again, and we've had an absolute blast through the first 2 preseason games we've gone live for. If you see this thumbnail with Mikal Bridges and Tyler Hero on it, make sure you click on it. We'll be live. Shout out to Mr. DJ. Hopefully you're tuned in tomorrow once again. But now I want to talk about Victor Oladipo. Could we see a 4th straight season of Depot Day in the 305? And where does this stem from? Well, Adrian Wojnarowski, shout out St. Bonaventure, had this report earlier today that the Houston Rockets traded Kevin Porter Jr. and a couple second-round picks to the Thunder, who they waived Porter Jr. immediately. And then they sent Victor Oladipo and Jeremiah Robinson-Earl to the Rockets, where, honestly, Oladipo used to play for Houston. It didn't last too long before they traded him to the Miami Heat. But the reason why this intrigues me and why I think that he could be coming back to the 305 is because of this tweet right here. So if you don't follow me already on Twitter, make sure you do. But I said this earlier today once the trade happened. The Heat could now sign Victor Oladipo if bought out / waived because he was traded. I wouldn't be surprised if Oladipo comes home to the 305 this season. If you didn't know, because the Heat traded away Victor Oladipo, if the Thunder just bought out and waived him, the Heat would not be eligible to bring him back. But since there was another move to where Oladipo was traded, if he would be bought out now, the Heat would now be eligible to bring back Vic to the team. So I'll ask you this. If you're Pat Riley, you're the GM, Victor Oladipo gets bought out by the Houston Rockets, at least in the early part of the season or in the later part of the season. Would you bring back? Would you sign Oladipo if bought out? Type S for sign, type P for pass. I'd absolutely bring Vic back because he has been on this Heat roster for the past 2.5 seasons, and I think that he provides some stability to the Heat bench as a mentor, as a leader, and he can still play. I know there's going to be concerns about another significant injury to Oladipo, but I believe he can seriously still play. He made some big-time plays for the Heat over the past 2 seasons and 17 playoff games that we'll look at in just a moment. But one thing that you guys are going to want to ask about probably is if he will be able to play after sustaining that serious hamstring injury against the Bucks in the playoffs. Well, Shams Charania tweeted this out 6 months ago. Look at the date. April 24th, almost 6 months to the day. He said, sources say there is optimism Victor Oladipo will be able to resume basketball activities in 6 months and return to action next season. Well, that's 6 months ago. Wait a minute, he said 6 months. Could Victor Oladipo be ready to play sooner rather than later? And when you look at what Oladipo did for the Heat in 2.5 seasons, 54 games played, he averaged 11 points per night, 3.5 assists, 3.1 rebounds. Didn't shoot too well from the field, but the main thing Oladipo did was he was able to slash and get to the rim. And even if he missed the shot, it allowed Bam Adebayo to crash the board and get that offensive rebounds. And Oladipo provides really good defense on the perimeter as well. And that's what he was able to do for the Heat in 17 playoff stats. The numbers are not gaudy, but 10.7 points per game is serviceable off the bench, shooting 39%. That's not great, but the 1.2 steals per game. He will be able to give opponents trouble. And if you flash back to the 2022 Eastern Conference Finals, Oladipo was inserted late into games to guard Jaylen Brown. And we know Jaylen Brown has absolutely no left hand, and Oladipo exposed that. He was ripping JB nonstop, which allowed the Heat to steal Game 6 and force a Game 7 before they ultimately lost at home. But Oladipo provided great perimeter defense for the Heat, and if they brought him back, he would be able to play for the Heat in a defensive lineup in the late stretches of game. And I feel bad for Vic because he was playing very, very good in Game 3 against the Milwaukee Bucks in the first round last postseason. Obviously, the Heat sustained a ton of injuries last year. Tyler Hero gets hurt in Game 1, and Victor Oladipo was the next man up for the Heat. They inserted Max Strus in the starting lineup, and then Oladipo took Strus' spot on the bench in that rotation, and Vic balled out in the first 2 games, and then obviously suffered that serious injury. It was so heartbreaking. I hope Victor Oladipo is able to get back because he is a fantastic guy. He's still a good basketball player. And if the Heat signed him to the active roster, I would certainly not complain because he's a good vibe guy, good friends with Jimmy, good friends with Bam, good friends with Tyler too, and he'd be able to still give some minutes off the bench. I really hope Vic finds his way back into an NBA rotation, and I hope it's with the Miami Heat. And if the Heat did sign Victor Oladipo, you know we're making a video about it. So make sure you join the channel and subscribe, youtube.com/@HeatReport. And don't forget, we're going to be live for the Heat's preseason game tomorrow. So if you haven't already, turn on those notifications so you do not miss when we go live.